Hello again. Hope you're all doing well. I am going to be doing essentially a part two to the last video that talked about the criticism club, or the club of people who are sensitive to criticism. Remember, the name was given in a humorous way, so it is not meant to criticize anybody. It's meant to make it a little lighter and less heavy. So I'm going to go over a little bit what the criticism club is. And essentially, it's this phenomenon where Robert and I discovered that there are certain characteristics in some people, in fact, in many people, whereby they have a problem of misinterpreting when people are giving them advice or making comments. They have a misinterpretation happens frequently. For a person to belong to this club, if you wish, it has to be that it happens fairly frequently. So it's not that it happens, every blue moon. It's that it happens frequently, and that the person is actually misinterpreting the language that people are using as being judgmental or critical. And most importantly, I'm not sure I said this on the last video, but most importantly, there's a misinterpretation of motivation, meaning the intent of the person. They're misinterpreting that the person may be wanting to be helpful, correct problems, or give guidance. But instead of taking it as a helpful aid, they take it as a judgment or criticism. So remember that there's a range that goes from mild to moderate to severe. So when I was giving you the example of the people who use rather violent language, such as you're killing me, you're badgering me, raking me over the coals, those kind of violent experiences, violent comments, those tend to happen when the person is in the higher range of the criticism club. So in other words, very sensitive. And I want to also remind you that when a person speaks this way, if you're the receiver, it's very hard to hear that because it's not your experience at all. So to remind yourself, if you know somebody or in relationship with somebody who has this difficulty, to remind yourself that the person is actually feeling that severe, and to try and bring a little kind of compassion and empathy that unfortunately the person is perceiving things this way, even though you may not intend to. If you're the person who has this difficulty, then if you could remind yourself, if you hear this violent language, you're going to know the language. You're going to know the typical comments that this other person that you know or yourself make, and that it is a little bit over the top in terms of the severity of what the experience is like. Like, you're killing me. That's pretty severe, right? So at the end of the last video, a very good friend of mine made a comment about, thinking that he probably has this problem and noticing that maybe this is something that happens to him. He then made a comment that was very helpful, and I'm going to address it now. And the comment was, well, I think I have this problem, but how do we know when we're just in this place where we're misinterpreting, misperceiving, versus when it's actually happening? And to be honest, I hadn't thought about that very much, because I've been so invested in understanding this and in helping people with this, which was a discovery that people have these characteristics, some people have them, and then it happens frequently, that I hadn't really thought at contrasting. But it is actually very important to contrast what is real criticism or judgment versus that you have a sensitivity and that as a result of it, you're misinterpreting, okay? So let me tell you now what is the difference between this being part of the criticism club or sensitive club to actual criticism. One of the ways to know, one of the ways to pay attention is the tone of voice. Tone of voice says a lot. So the words that are used feel very different depending on the tone. So the tone when you're being criticized is one that is negative or hostile. This is not the case when you are experiencing it by misinterpretation. There is no hostility, and there is no negativity toward you. So if the tone is hostile and negative, then that's something to mark. So how do you know? Do you know? Because there is a sense of negativity to it, there's a sense of hostility to it. So that's how you pay attention to the tone. So you notice if the tone is like that, or if the tone is calmer, more even, then probably it's the misinterpretation that's happening. The other way to know is the language used. So the language that's being used is also going to be a cue to tell you whether you are misinterpreting or you are actually being criticized. So when you are being criticized, the language used is negative, It's sarcastic. It can be condescending and definitely hostile. Okay, so those are some things to keep in mind. What are the typical uses of language that would be criticism? Insults. Obviously, somebody using insults is criticizing you. So name calling, calling you stupid or lazy or anything like that. And also something that is often used and not a very good use of language, but it actually makes people feel bad, is when you use the words never or always. Like you're always late, you are never on time, you never clean up. Because in reality, a little aside, no, human beings are so complex, we're so complex, that there is no way that any of us are in any moment an always or never situation. We may have a frequency of certain things. It may be that it does happen a lot. But when you tell somebody always or never, it's very jarring. It feels awful because that's never true for any of us. So watching for that language. So within the umbrella of language, the other thing to look for is character attacks. Criticisms, judgments are character attacks. So you could be called too sensitive, lazy, but it's something that attacks your character. So that's another thing to look for as a differentiation of an actual criticism versus the misinterpretation of the criticism club. And another thing is that the language is attacking your ability. So it could be saying, you know, you have horrible memory, or you have you're never able to put things away. So character attacks as well as attacks on your abilities. That's in terms of language, what kinds of things would be part of being criticized versus not. The other one that's very important, so I've said tone, I've said language. The other one that's very important is nonverbal cues. So nonverbal cues is if you look at the person and you look at their expression on their face and their body language, that's the nonverbal cues. So a typical verbal cue that is definitely a critical thing is rolling your eyes. Rolling your eyes, pointing a finger, sighs, also dismissive gestures with your hands, like, oh, something like that. So you look at the body language, you look at the face, and you look for these little things that indicate that there is, usually like with rolling of the eyes, it's condescending. It's putting you down. It's thinking that you're somehow below, right? So that's definitely criticism. Pointing a finger. Going back to language for a minute, when you look at tone, usually another thing that could be understood as critical is when the comment is made like a demand or a command. It's a little harsh, right? So that too could be something to pay attention and to see, is the person ordering me? And again, if it's somebody that you're relating to, then, you know, let them know that you're actually just asking for something. Help them out that way. If it's you, then pay attention if this is a theme of yours, to feel like you're being ordered around or, you know, bullied. To notice, is the language the person is using actually a request? That's indicate a request. Like, could you, would you, can you? So when I was using the example of my patient with the baby, what I did say is, could you move the pillow, right? So could you is definitely not a command or a demand. So that's something that I wanted to give also as a way to understand the difference. Another characteristic is empathy, meaning when a person is being critical, they lack empathy. So when a person is not being critical, they don't lack empathy. So empathy meaning that they lack a desire to understand your perspective, they lack a desire to understand the context, and they lack a desire to inquire into what is your perspective. So empathy, or rather the lack of empathy, is a pointer into that you are in fact in the realm of being criticized or put down. So now, to differentiate again between the criticism club of the sensitivity to criticism and to actual criticism, we can also differentiate by looking at, is it constructive criticism or is it destructive criticism? So constructive criticism, a key component of that is that it usually is specific to a problem, and constructive criticism aims to help. Remember that I said at the beginning that in the criticism club, the problem is that there's a misunderstanding, misinterpretation of motivation. So if the person is actually aiming to help you, aiming to correct the problem, that would not be criticism, right? So when it isn't criticism, when it is constructive, usually it's not a laundry list of your flaws, but it's actually commenting on one or two things, preferably maybe one, and then aiming to correct it. So they could be telling you details of what has happened and how you could correct it, because they're trying to help you with something. Or they could be giving you specific guidance with something. And that's the difference. When it's criticism, there's no real specific detail of the problem. It's just to kind of build you, instead of building you up, which is constructive criticism, it's to tear you down, right? So notice if the person is actually pointing to something specific. Notice if the person is giving you details of how you could correct it. And if that's the case, then you can be pretty sure that this is constructive versus criticism or judgment. The other thing that you can take into account as what could be criticism is when a person you have somebody that you know that is repeating the same thing over and over to you at different moments, but you notice that these repetitions of these flaws or mistakes that they're noticing, they are not really aiming to correct it. So there is not really looking for a way to fix the problem. It just seems to be a list of things that they observe in you or find in you that are negative. So repetition is another way you can consider that this person is being critical of me. But again, remember, intent is very important. So if the intent is to help or to correct a mistake, then they're going to be giving you some specific item, and they're going to be possibly telling you how to correct it. If that's missing, then you're pretty sure that you are in the realm of the criticism. So in the criticism club, you would experience the person as doing something harmful to you, but you're actually misinterpreting. In the constructive criticism, you are actually going to notice that there is signs that the person is pointing to something specific and trying to help you with that. And when you're looking at actual criticism of judgment, then you may want to go back to the video on anger, because then when we are being judged and criticized, then to be angry about it, it's healthy anger. If you recall, you can always go back and watch it. And in that state, what we want to do is tell the person to stop. So we would tell the person, you know what, use this word, you're repeating the same thing, you're not actually telling me how to correct it. If it's body language, it's pretty clear. People who are rolling their eyes, that's obviously very condescending, right? Or you could tell the person, you know, the tone that you're having with me is as if you're looking down at me or you're impatient with me. So you could say these things to them and ask them to stop, right? So it's very important that you tell the person, listen, this is happening, but you need to be clear that these things are happening, right? And it's very uncomfortable and I don't like it, and please stop. So that's very important. If the person doesn't stop, then it's very important that you remove yourself from the situation, because continuing there may just exacerbate the problem, make you feel worse, elevate feelings, and when the feelings are elevated, unfortunately, we don't operate very well. We don't construct our sentences very well. We're not very aware of the impact in the future, and so we could exacerbate a problem. And if you don't operate healthily when you are trying to stop somebody from doing something wrong, such as being judgmental and critical of you, if you yourself don't do it correctly, then later you may feel bad or guilty, or maybe wondering whether it was right what you did or wrong what you did. But if you know that you're doing it in a constructive way, simply by saying you're doing X, please stop, then you won't feel this guilt, and you won't feel like it's my fault and I was wrong. And that's very important, because you can leave the situation feeling it's not me, because I did it in a constructive way and I did it promptly. You don't want these things to accumulate, because when these things accumulate, two things happen. Number one, you're building up anger and you're not going to be in your best shape. So that's one problem. And remember, constructive anger operates in the moment. The other piece is that you may be telling the person too many things that have happened, and that's not helpful to the other person, because when you tell a person many problems, now you yourself may be in the place of possibly having the person feel criticized. So best to pause after you've explained that you don't want this behavior to continue. Again, these are new concepts that I'm bringing to you, and I hope it's helpful. I haven't been looking at the comments. I apologize for that. I do want you to make comments. and ask questions. And so please do that. And my apologies that I haven't been able to do that. I haven't actually been looking at them, but I will be doing that in the future. So I will make sure to pick up on a comment or a question every video that I do going forward. And again, I am trying to grow an audience. So if you enjoyed this video, if you could please subscribe. If you found the video helpful, that's something that made you understand things better or understand something completely new, please give it the like button. I think it's a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more videos when they come out, see them and hear them, then please do the little bell that notifies you when a new video has come out. Thank you very much for listening and for being part of my journey here. And I hope you have a wonderful day or evening, whatever you're at. And I'll see you soon again. Bye.